Hello and welcome to the latest episode of the Dribble Drive podcast. Your hosts, Austin Render, Dalton Shetler, with you on Tuesday, July 8th. We've got another preview episode for you today. We're going to be joined by the voice of the Nebraska Cornhuskers, Matt Coatney, here shortly to chat about Nebraska, a team that did not lose a single player in the transfer portal this past offseason. They added some talent. Now they've got to replace Markowski. We'll certainly talk about that, but I think the outlook for Nebraska is very good, and we'll chat with Matt about that coming up here shortly. A reminder to head over to the Back Home Network YouTube channel if you're listening to us in audio form. The visuals, if you want to see the beautiful faces of Dalton and Matt on this episode here today, you can do that by heading over to the Back Home Network YouTube channel. Subscribe there. There's a podcast tab that you can click on there, and you can find all 54 episodes of our podcast. So head that way. If you are watching us, we appreciate that. And if you want to listen to us on the go, we're on Apple and Spotify podcasts as well. Give us a download, a rating. All that stuff helps us continue to grow our podcast here into year 2. And if you did not listen to preview episode number 1, episode 53, that was with the Maryland head coach, Brenda Frese. And just a wonderful, she gave us 25 minutes. It was terrific. I learned a lot, not only about the Terps, but about Brenda Frese's coaching style, and just an easy person to root for. Just really, really easy to root for. So go back, give that one a listen. Definitely worth your time. But Dalton, let's talk some Nebraska. How are you doing, man?
I'm doing pretty good. And look at us. We're wearing cream shirts for the visual audience or whatever. What's the chances Matt pops in with some cream or tan or khaki too, and we're all simpatico?
You know, I'm gonna guess he's wearing red if I had to venture a guess. But you know what? If he comes in with cream, then we're the Three Musketeers here all of a sudden. So,
I like it.
We'll see. We'll see the dramatic awaiting of what Matt will be wearing. I'm sure everyone's on the edge of their seats for that. This Nebraska team's really interesting, Dalton, and I'll throw the graphic up on the screen for our folks watching along visually. This team has a ton coming back, but I think the thing you have to start with before you get any further with Nebraska this year, Dalton, is what's not on this graphic, which is Alexis Markowski. They didn't lose anybody to the transfer portal, but they lost one of their best players of all time to graduation. So the big hole for Nebraska down low is going to be difficult to fill, and I think that's where all eyes will look, at least early in the season, for Nebraska.
I think you're spot on. And speaking from the self-centered perspective, with Michigan State being kind of the camp, Nebraska has been really the kryptonite for Michigan State in the 2 years Robin Freilic's been there. And in big part, it's because of Alexis Markowski. So just seeing her gone, I think, will be a relief for many teams in the Big Ten. Now, that does not mean Nebraska's an easy out by any means, but that's how good Markowski was. When you compile the points, the rebounds, double-double, I mean, she has multiple records now for that program. That's how dominant she was. But it becomes really interesting, Austin, because when you start looking at this Nebraska team, there's a lot of shooting ability. Oh, yeah. And there's a lot of perimeter-based stuff. What gets really interesting is, I don't know how you even attempt to plan to fill the shoes of Markowski with just a player or a certain style. I think that's something that head coach Amy Williams is going to have to find out throughout the course of the season that's coming up. But we saw Britt Prince as a freshman really emerge in a couple of different ways, stepping up when the team needed her. This team went through a stretch without Natalie Potts, who suffered from an injury and was out for the rest of the season. And once that happened, they kind of had a hard time finding their footing. But once Britt Prince kind of saw the void that was there and decided to step up and deliver in some of those moments and help the team how she did, I think that really kind of served as the springboard of optimism for Nebraska fans this upcoming year. It's that Britt Prince is going to be an elite playmaker. I think that's what you have to invest in. She's got to be an elite playmaker, shot creator, not just for herself and for others. But I think we saw the glimpses where that's possible for Prince and the Huskers.
I think the people who missed out on Britt Prince were watching her last year going, man, would have loved to have her on our team. I mean, it really grew into herself But I think you're right. You can't replace somebody like Markowski with one player. I think I am closely enough to relate to this where with Indiana, they lost Mackenzie Holmes.
Yep.
And I don't know. I'm not going to sit here and go through the numbers on who was better. That's not the point. The point is that they were both pillars of their program for a long time at that 5 position, and it leaves a void when they're gone. In Indiana, their plan was, I think, by committee with Lily Meister and Caroline Striplin, and it didn't really work, to be honest with you. And then eventually the staff kind of had to adjust, and they played more into the hands of their guards, tried to use their bigs more outside the arc than they had previously with Mackenzie Holmes. They had to play a different style. So that'll be the question for Amy Williams this year is what kind of style is Nebraska going to play? Because to be honest with you, they already kind of played like, honestly, Indiana and Nebraska last year were extremely similar teams. If you looked at them, they were two, I think, top 2 or 3 of the best 3-point shooting teams in the league. And they had 5s in, and Markowski probably a little better than Striplin, but 5s that could pull you out from the basket, knock down a 3, a lot of screen and rolls at the top of the key, and they had guards that could get downhill and get to the basket in a Britt Prince, and a Chloe Moore McNeil, and they had shooters all around the arc. So I actually think it's going to be it's not going to be that big of a difference because I think Markowski was able to stretch it more than like a Mackenzie Holmes was. So that now that I talk myself through it, that comparison isn't totally apples to apples. But long story short, that's the big number one thing you look at with Nebraska. I think number 2 is Natalie Potts.
Yep.
You mentioned it. Lost her 5 games into the season last year, and it took Nebraska a while to get its sea legs under them because they had planned. And you talk to any coach, you go into a season planning for the roster that you have in front of you. And when that roster abruptly changes, like it did with Natalie Potts, all of a sudden, what do? And it took them some time, and they had some tough games on their schedule, and they took some bumps along the road. But they did eventually figure it out. Hey, this is who we've got. This is what we've got to work with. And Markowski kind of put it on her shoulders, and Britt Prince. And I know we called him out after the LA trip and said, hey, Alexis has got to be better. Nebraska's got to be better. And they were. And they played great down the stretch and got into the tournament. So we'll see. But the question – number 2 for Nebraska is what is Natalie Potts able to give them? Can she return to what it looked like she was going to be in November of last year?
No, I think you nailed it. And I think you bring up a great point, even though you didn't quite say apples to apples for the previous Indiana regime and what Nebraska is going to be, but there's a shade of it, right? And I find it interesting if you think back to the last episode, the conversation we had with Brenda Fries. She said there's times where I get into the season and say, you know what, this doesn't make sense anymore. We're dumping on it. We're hitting eject. We're moving on. I'm curious if Nebraska is going to be able to have a concrete plan heading into the season. It's not necessarily a bad thing if it doesn't pan out maybe the way they envision it. You just had a national champion coach last week say that there's many times he realizes this isn't going to work and we have to adjust. But I'm curious to see if Nebraska how they try to replace this, the 4-round one that they really were kind of doing for the last couple of years around Markowski. If they go with a player in the front court, like you had mentioned for Indiana, they tried a couple of players in Striplin and Meister, and it wasn't quite the same. It wasn't square in square hole, able to produce the same way. If it doesn't work for Nebraska that way, how do they evolve that offense? And I think that part's going to be really fascinating to watch what they're able to get there, because you nailed it, Austin. This team has shooters galore.
Yep.
Almost
everywhere.
Everybody that's on the floor.
Everywhere.
They just shoot the lights out. Yep. The question will be, who can get them the ball to shoot in those spots? Because these aren't necessarily they're really good spot-up shooters. I don't know that their biggest strength, especially relative to the rest of the conference, would be to create the shots on their own. So who gets them the ball to hit those shots? That's going to be really fascinating to watch.
Yeah, and you look at those transfers down there in the bottom left corner. If you're watching us visually, Claire Johnson's the leading scorer coming in this transfer class from Samford. She's a guard. So there's another wing option there for Nebraska. The second on the list, though, is Eliza Maupin. I believe I'm saying that right. I looked it up on the Kansas State game notes. Eliza Maupin from Kansas State, about 4 points a game, but she is one of their bigger bodies. So can she kind of grow into a role? You also look, Dalton, a little bit at Petra Bojan, who's not on this graphic, but somebody who I think got valuable experience last year in the Big Ten Conference. Another big they can kind of throw. Amaya Hargrove, I thought, got really good minutes last year for Nebraska as well. So those are some of the options that come to my brain when I'm thinking about what could be a potential 5 situation for Nebraska.
And we did see Emily Fisher, the former Terrapin who transferred in, end spots for the Terps. Yep. And so there's already familiarity there. It'll be interesting to see how that fits in with Nebraska, but I think that's an option. And I was curious, too, just in case any of the listeners are as well, Maupin, who you brought up from Kansas State, you mentioned she's got size 6'3" for the listeners who are unfamiliar with her. So another big frame to kind of work with there in the post.
Well, you and I can hypothesize about what Nebraska is going to look like all day, but there's nobody better to tell us what Nebraska is going to look like than our guest today, the play-by-play voice of the Nebraska women's basketball program. Matt Coatney joins us. Matt, good afternoon. How are you?
Hey, good afternoon, guys. Can you hear me okay?
We got you loud and clear. We're excited to have you. We were just kind of giving an intro to what this Nebraska team could look like. This is a team that I think we started number one, Matt, by saying the big question mark is how do they fill the shoes of Alexis Markowski, a program great, one of the best to play for the Huskers. It's not going to be a one-person replacement, I would imagine, but from what you have seen as you've collected the roster and what you've heard, what is at least the temporary plan here in July for trying to fill those shoes?
Well, I don't think you can replace Alexis Markowski with a single person. That's very hard to do. But I think what Amy Williams has done is work the transfer portal extremely well. And she's also worked the emergency room very well to get Natalie Potts back. I think that Nebraska is very, very excited to have a healthy Natalie Potts, the 2024 Big Ten Freshman of the Year. She is chomping at the bit to get back. But you take a look at this transfer portal. You gentlemen are certainly familiar with Haley Weaver, who transferred from Northwestern, is one of the most cerebral and athletic players that has played in the Big Ten. Another Big Ten transfer is Emily Fisher, who is a combo guard, plays the 3, the 4, transfer from Maryland. Then a sharpshooting 3, and Claire Johnson coming out of Sanford is joining the team. And then you talked about Eliza Maupin, who backed up Ayoka Lee at Kansas State. So I don't think you replace Alexis Markowski with any one person. But when you start with Natalie Potts in the middle and then some of the people that I brought up, kind of softens that blow a little bit.
Matt, it's great to see you, man. I hope the summer's been well. Not that we all play favorites, especially here at the Dribble Drive, but Matt Coatney is one of our favorites among the Big Ten radio crew.
Thank you, gentlemen. Thank you.
Well, there's a lot of different branches to take off of what you said, but you talked about Amy Williams maybe playing doctor in the spare time to get Natalie Potts back. Can you explain for some of the people who may forget just a couple of years ago what Natalie Potts did, as you said, freshman of the year, what she brings to the program when healthy as expected this year?
You know, can guard 1 through 5. That's the number one thing, and I don't think enough people talked about that. They really talked about how her offense as a freshman improved down the stretch and how her outside shooting improved. But, you know, Natalie Potts came through the door ready to dance as a freshman defensively. Amy Williams put her at the front of Nebraska's pressure, and she's got length. She's like an antelope out there. She's got speed, and she can quickly recover down to the post. Well, the first time I saw Potts in practice 2 summers ago, I thought she's too skinny to play in the Big Ten. I thought she was going to be a back-to-the-basket post, and I was sorely mistaken. She is very athletic, loves to rebound, loves to run. But defensively, Nebraska took a big hit last year when Potts was off the floor. Now she comes back. She's able to set up that pressure. And, you know, I named off a whole bunch of people. Nebraska is going to be very deep. They get 14 on the roster right now, and I think 14 are going to play. Amy Williams likes to play her roster. Potts has improved, according to her, in the offseason in terms of developing a three-point shot. I talked to her, and she said, "Hey, Coatney, I've been working on my three-pointer. I'm getting pretty good." I'm like, "Yeah, we'll see." Natalie Potts wouldn't tell me that if she didn't feel pretty good about her three-point shooting. She is a competitor. She has been successful throughout her high school and now college career. She wants to do one thing, and that's win, and she wants to will her team to win. I'm so excited to see that young lady back out on the floor.
You sound like a Natalie Potts three-point skeptic is what I'm hearing. But look, if Dalton and I learned anything last year, every time we started to doubt Nebraska on this very podcast, they would come out and have some sort of resounding victory that we didn't see coming. So we welcome the Nebraska doubting on this podcast because it does tend to spur the Huskers into good things.
Yeah, I know we were down pretty low after a couple of losses. The loss at home to Washington, really hurt Nebraska. Then they went on the road to Iowa, a team that had beaten USC at home. And Britt Prince had the game of her life, stuck a three in the corner to force overtime late in the game. And, the win against Maryland, anytime you win against Maryland on the road, you've done something. So, yeah, there were a lot of times, especially after Potts got hurt, because Amy Williams really had to try and find a way to get a set roster. And that starting lineup really didn't emerge until midway through the conference season. It took them about a month and a half for everything to settle down after Potts got hurt.
Well, let's dive into that because I was impressed by the way they were able to pivot and figure it out and get the team in the NCAA tournament, because we were just talking about it before you got on. Every team plans with the roster they come into the season with, and 5 games into the year, probably the second best player on the roster is taken away from this coaching staff. How impressed were you by how they were able to adapt, and how exactly did they do it throughout the season?
It wasn't just Natalie Potts. Think about Allison Widener, who had ACL'd the previous year and came back and then got hurt again. Allison Widener was a all-conference kind of player that Nebraska was really kind of counting on. So a lot of people stepped up. I'm going to start with Callan Hake, and I said it throughout the year, and no one believed me. I said, if you don't vote for her on the Big Ten all-defensive team, you've not been paying attention. She took an average of 1 charge a game. She rotated on backline help defense like I haven't seen a guard in years at Nebraska. And I think Callan Hake really stabilized the loss of Allison Widener. And then up front, a couple of people really stepped up. Jessica Petrie, the sophomore of last year out of Gold Coast, Australia, got increased playing time and did good things with that increased playing time, increased her point production by about 6 points a game. And then somebody Nebraska didn't even know they were going to get till September last year is Petra Bojan, who came in and down the stretch in the latter stages of the season, she was, I think, in double figures 3 straight games and a very, very high field goal percentage. And then one of the most athletic players Nebraska has recruited in years is Amaya Hargrove out of a small town in Illinois. During the NCAA tournament in the game against Louisville at TCU, she made one of the greatest recoveries after TCU got a steal, running down the floor to block a shot and make a defensive play. I think Amaya Hargrove might be one of the most overlooked players heading into this upcoming season in the Big Ten. I expect big things out of her. So the 3 of them, Bojan, Petrie, and Hargrove, kind of joined together to replace Potts in that lineup. Not the same skill set, certainly for all of them, but certainly enough to get Nebraska back into the NCAA tournament.
That's interesting. That's a pretty good nugget heading into the next season as well. One of the players that, at least from the outside, Matt, that was really impressive in a couple of ways was Britt Prince. And as a freshman, you saw her take command at a certain point. At least from the outside, one of the things that was really interesting is Markowski demands so much attention, right, because of how great she was. But there are just sometimes a guard has to step up and make plays. And it felt like through the first couple of months, Prince is kind of figuring things out. She's making impacts, but she's figuring things out. And eventually a light flips where she says, I need to take command of these certain moments. I need to kind of run some of this stuff. And the confidence just started to exude from it. What does she bring to this program in year 2? How much better can she be than she was last year?
That's a great question, Dalton. She's got unlimited ceiling. I mean, she really does. Britt was one of the most highly rated recruits to come out of Nebraska in a long time. Everybody wanted Britt. And, she is a coach's daughter, great family, Ann and Mark Prince. I think Britt tried to be pretty deferential early in the season, as you kind of noted. She took her a while to figure out how to get the ball to Alexis Markowski in a place that she could best go to work on the low block. Once she got that figured out, then Nebraska really kind of got rolling. But I think Britt figured out during the Rutgers game on the road that there are times that she's just going to have to take over at that guard spot. A year ago, everybody was asking, how is Nebraska going to replace Jazz Shelley? And I told everybody, do not compare this freshman to Jazz Shelley. They're two different kinds of players. Britt Prince is going to be a different player this year, and I'm going to compare her a little bit to Lindsey Moore, who is the only player in Nebraska history to play on 2 Sweet 16 teams, and the only point guard to play for an undefeated team as a true freshman. Lindsey Moore, her first year was pretty deferential to just a great Husker group that went undefeated back in the Big 12 days. And then her second year, she figured out she needed to be a scorer. And I think our fans were shocked to see Lindsey putting up 20, 30 points in a game. I think Britt Prince, now that she is going into her second year and feels much more comfortable, and I'm going to be careful in the way I say this, she's probably going to be better as a scorer and a creator without Markowski, because you need to feed Markowski the ball. I don't think anybody would disagree with that. But if you're not going to have that post player in there, then the lane clears up a little bit more for you. And the floor is going to be spread a little bit more, because there's going to be times that Natalie Potts is out playing on the wing, and that lane's going to open up. And I think Nebraska will run a lot more 1-4 high sets to get Britt Prince isolated going down the lane. I had a nice talk with Britt on the streets of Fort Worth, Texas after the NCAA tournament game, and she was pretty disappointed losing that. And I said, next year starts right now. And I said, this needs to become your team, don't you? And she looked at me. She said, really? I said, it needs to start becoming your team right now. And she got a big smile on her face. And I really think you're going to see when you start talking about this team a year from now, instead of leading the podcast with Alexis Markowski, you're going to be talking about how does Britt Prince repeat that great sophomore year she had, because I really think that competitive young lady is going to have an unbelievable sophomore season.
Right, that's music to a lot of Husker fans' ears right there, because she was awesome in year 1, and I think we're all excited to see her in year 2. Nobody transfers out of this program, Matt. That's a big deal. You get a lot of these role players back. The supporting cast is back. Which one of those players do you need to see take a step forward to have this team take a step forward?
Well, I'm a big Logan Nisley fan. Logan has battled foot problems her first couple of years, so she's had limited minutes. And still, even in limited minutes, she's been very productive. She started the last 10 games of her freshman year, which ended up in the second round of the NCAA tournament. Dynamic three-point shooter. And I think as Logan gets away from some of her foot problems, I don't think they're ever going to be perfect, but I think she's going to be able to play probably 5 more minutes a game this year. What Logan showed last year in her limited playing time is she can be an elite defender on the ball. Even though she's probably not the fastest defender, her basketball IQ is off the charts. And for Nebraska to replace Alexis Markowski's scoring, Logan Nisley is going to have to hit 1 more three-pointer a game and get to the foul line a little bit more. Another player I think can increase her production is Callan Hake. Callan is a team leader, not only on the floor, but away from the locker room. She's one of the most cerebral basketball players I've known, competitive. Everybody loves Callan. I think that she's going to have a great senior year. And then I also think, I talked about Amaya Hargrove. I think that everybody's going to look up and say, where'd this kid come from? Because she played very limited minutes last year as a freshman. I think she's going to play a lot of minutes. And then in terms of the transfers who came in, every time Nebraska played Emily Fisher in Maryland, it seems like she was doing great things. So I expect a lot out of Emily Fisher. I think she's going to replace the Kendall Moriarty role. Kendall Moriarty, a kid out of the Chicagoland area, had a really good 4-year career as a role player for Nebraska, defensive stopper. I think Fisher can come in there. And then, Amy Williams loves the three-pointer, as you all know. And she went down to Sanford and got Claire Johnson, who was all conference in the SoCon, and she is a dynamic three-point shooter, loves being here. So there's a lot of quote-unquote role players who could step up. And I think the great news there is you're not going to rely on Callan Haight to get 10 and 5 every night. I think it can be anybody in any given night, depending on the matchup or how they're feeling. And so those are some names I think people should be looking out for.
Well, and there's no doubt about it. Amy Williams loves the three-pointer, and she's got more shooters than the U.S. military, if you take a look at Nebraska year in, year out. And you talk about some of those, Matt, and I'm curious. We talk about the perimeter focus, and we've talked about Markowski a lot. And how can you not, right? And wondering what's next for the Huskers. As we're kind of talking this out, Matt, I'm really curious. All those shooters on the floor, do you get to a spot where you talked about maybe some 1-4 high sets, and maybe you're just playing 5 out around the perimeter at times because Markowski's gone? But the other thing too, Matt, is a lot of the back-to-basket post players in the conference are gone. Now, Lauren Betts is still out there. You still have some greats. But overall, there aren't as many of those. Can you take advantage of that if you're Nebraska and just go shooters at times, maybe even 5 out?
Yeah, I think the game is really evolving. I think we've all seen that. But Nebraska is not conceding the paint with Markowski leaving, with Maupin, Bojan, Petrie, and Hargrove and Potts. I mean, those are 5 players who can play back to the basket. But the number of shooters that the Huskers are going to have, Weaver can shoot the 3, Johnson, Fisher, this freshman Alana Neal, 5'10" guard out of the Los Angeles area. She's an athlete, and she's going to be battling for playing time with a very deep roster. But with Potts extending her range, I'm going to believe, Natalie, that she's developed a good 3-point shot. Prince obviously can hit the 3. Nisley, Haight. You're talking about Nebraska could spread it out, would put 4 sharpshooting 3-point shooters out there. So I think Amy Williams can play a lot of multiple ways this year. I always say year after year, when you're replacing an all-conference kind of player, you don't really replace them. You just play differently, And I think every school kind of does that when you're like, oh, what are they going to do when they lose this player? Well, you just play a little differently. And I think don't look for Nebraska to be so focused down on the block. I think Nebraska will be a much more slice and cut off screens, getting the guards going. I think you guys are right. There are going to be times that Nebraska is just going to, try and shoot you out of the game, like the 23s they hit up in the game at the Sanford Pentagon. A game I had to miss. I actually had to miss a game to cover football this year, and I wasn't too happy. Nebraska's they played South Dakota last year, and a guy filled in for me. I was like, you got 23s to call. So I got to find a game this year where we hit 21. So that might happen this year.
Boy, the bar is high for Matt Coatney. 21 3-pointers. Last thing on, I know we've talked a lot about her, but I just want to get for Nebraska fans, like the perspective, and maybe for people who aren't Nebraska fans, the legacy that will be left behind for Alexis Markowski, what she has meant to this program. She was a Nebraska kid. It was in the stars that not only she would come here, but she would play so well. But what is the legacy that she will leave behind her at Nebraska?
Toughness. Lex played hurt. Lex played with an attitude. I will never forget being at Purdue when Nebraska had a big lead late and Lex got an and one. She got all fired up and turned around and punched. I can't remember the player's name. It was the co-Big Ten Freshman of the Year with Natalie Potts, and she transferred.
Mary Ashley Stevenson.
Yeah, Mary. Yeah, thank you. punched Mary Ashley Stevenson in the face completely by accident, got thrown out of the game with about 2 minutes left. Seemed so embarrassed, walked off. The Purdue fans were not mad at her. Everybody understood it. But I think that just kind of tells you Alexis Markowski's story is she brought a toughness and an edge to her teammates that's going to be difficult to replace. You know, she liked hitting the three-pointer because she knew that fired everybody up. She liked getting the bruises. You know, if you looked at Lex and she came out on the floor, you weren't always sure what her natural skin color was because it was purple throughout much of her body. And I think she sought contact as much as she received contact. A Nebraska kid who loved playing for the Huskers, loved wearing the block end. Her dad, Andy, played for the men's basketball team many years ago. They love everything about Lincoln. They love everything about Nebraska. But if I'm thinking about one thing, and there's a million things I can think about Lex, it would be her toughness. I'm also going to say she was all bus ride, first team all bus ride. She got on the bus. The music was loud. She's a big personality. Her teammates loved her. And, you know, I have a hard time saying there's just one thing, but I love Lex like my own daughter. And hopefully she'll be, you know, ubiquitous, you know, and be around where I can catch up with her. But I'm going to miss her.
That's really cool. And Matt, I actually want to take a moment to shift the spotlight to you, if you don't mind, for a moment, because you talk about the games where 23s that you didn't get to have. As Husker fans know, a 3 goes in and Matt Coatney belts a "you betcha." That's the catchphrase, and it's so popular that you go to games at the Vault and you look around and there's signs held up by fans that say "you betcha," like you are a celebrity.
Yeah, he's got one back there.
There's a roller banner back here in my office. It's been a breath mint. It's been a Valentine's Day card. It's been 18 printings on T-shirts. I'm the luckiest guy in the world. It's been identified with the program, and when it first started off, I kind of shied away from it because I didn't want to be the "where's the beef" guy or the I've fallen and I can't get up guy. But I've come through the years to realize that's what fans want. It's when Amy Williams took over for Connie Yori here, she said, you know, it's very important for us for branding. And she embraces everything about it. So I've been pretty lucky, guys. I'm probably, as you guys know, when you get to do what we get to do at this level, you're blessed. You know, there are a lot of dues you pay to get some places, and sometimes you fall backwards into luck. And I've fallen backwards into so many good things here at Nebraska, and my 3-point call is one that I'm pretty proud of because the fans love it. And if the fans love it, then it's a good thing.
I was going to say you could run for mayor of Lincoln with that type of popularity around it. But as just a follow-up to it, Matt, what's the origin of "you betcha"? What started that specific phrase for you?
I love telling the story because I shared in the glory with my best friend, Don West, who was the guy who replaced me when I left what was Southwest Missouri State, which is where Jackie Stiles played before I came to Nebraska. But we were playing Drake and Coach Lisa Bluter in 1994 at the Hammond Center in Springfield, Missouri. And Melody Howard from Marshfield, Missouri had 9 3-pointers, and we're looking through. We didn't have computers in those days. We're looking through the NCAA record book to see that Danielle Viglione from Texas had the NCAA record 11 threes in the game. And so when Melody hit her 11th, Don West said, "Can she hit an 11th three? You betcha she can." Okay. So let's fast forward many years later. I'm in Nebraska. Now there's this thing called online streaming. And I knew Don was listening down in Missouri, and I wanted to kind of send him a message that only he would know I was talking to him. So somebody for Nebraska hit a big 3, so I drop a big "you betcha." And I get home, and my son Nate said to me, I think Nate was probably about 9 or 10, he said, "Hey, Dad, you should stay with that 3-point call." And I said, "What 3-point call?" I had no idea what he was talking about. I said, "Oh, no, that was just me playing with Don West." Next day, I got to the Devaney Center, and Abby Swatsworth, one of our longtime fans, had made a "you betcha" sign and showed it to me. And then the next game, Bill and Diane Stewart from Aurora, Nebraska had made a red You Betcha sign and had a Sharpie and wanted me to sign it. And I had to stay with it because I had an older fan got mad at me. She read me out of the game. She said, I told my friends Nebraska didn't hit a three because Matt Coatney didn't say You Betcha, and I was wrong. And if you don't say You Betcha, I don't know what's going to. So I had to start saying it every time. And so it's become synonymous. When Jordan Hooper played in the World University Games on ESPN in Russia, Brendan Van Langen said it when Hooper hit a three. It has become that synonymous with the program. We played Kansas many years ago before we joined the Big Ten. Bonnie Henriksen was the head coach. She walks off the bus, walks to my broadcast position, puts her hand out, gives me a high five and yells, You Betcha. She says, I've been scouting you guys and been listening to your 3-point call for 2 days. I can't get it out of my head. So so that's the genesis. It started off not really as a joke, but an homage to it's really Don West's call. He never did anything with it. I took it and ran with it, but I always try and credit Don, the great. Now he's the TV voice for Missouri State Sports. He's Missouri Sports Hall of Famer. But that's the story, guys. I fell backwards into it.
What a good story. That's awesome. And you mentioned those fans. On our episode last week with Brenda Free, she mentioned that Nebraska is her favorite place to go outside of the Xfinity Center because she said the fans are just so intelligent. They respect great basketball. I think she said they went there one year and won by 20 or 30 points, and there were fans lining up after the game to congratulate her and get autographs and whatnot. The fan base, I always say Pinnacle Bank Arena deserves more than what it gets in terms of the recognition for such a great home court advantage. I love going there. I'm psyched that it's on our schedule this year. But let's talk a little bit about what the fans do for this team and the atmosphere at PBA.
I had to learn when I moved here in the late 1990s that if you put the block in on something, whether it's bowling, volleyball, women's basketball, rifle is big here in Nebraska. You've got a built-in fan base. Our women's basketball fans are just amazing, and Brenda is correct. And if I can for a moment, I want to shout out to Brenda Freeze. When we broke a 15-game losing streak to Maryland during what I call the Allison Widener game a couple of years ago, our players dogpiled at the free throw line. Brenda Freeze came down to shake somebody's hand. There was nobody there. And I'm on the air doing the post game, and she didn't care. She leans in and whispers into my microphone, hey, you guys were the better team today. Nebraska's a class program. Congratulations to you. Please tell Amy congratulations. Now, who does that? Brenda Free is one of my favorites. And so I think Nebraska fans recognize that. Whenever we've had a big win in the postseason, they're always out at the airport supporting us. Whenever we do Amy's call-in show, we've always got a million texts and calls. It's fun. And I love Pinnacle Bank Arena. When people say to me sometimes, what's your favorite arena in the league? I kind of default and I say, I like my home arena. I really do. I think they've done it correctly. It's in the entertainment district in the Haymarket area of Lincoln. I love our broadcast position. I like being on the floor. Yes. And it's got a lot of amenities, but a lot of it is the fans. You guys are exactly right. And, I'm pretty lucky where I am because the fans, I think, are very knowledgeable here. Not just women's basketball, but I think all sports, especially with Nebraska softball had a big year this year. Volleyball, obviously, is outrageously popular here. So can't say enough about our fan base. It's top notch.
I love being on the court, but I love Nebraska because you're opposite the scorer's table, so there's a little bit more room to breathe. Like sometimes you're sitting so scrunched at those scorer's tables, but Nebraska is such a great vantage point.
And Austin's very partial to Little Red.
Oh my gosh, he's my favorite mascot in the entire league. He's out there like putting his arms out like a T-Rex, inflating him in and out. The head's coming up and down. Oh, I love
We're getting a new Little Red this year. There were 2 students who had won the competition, and they were Little Red for 4 years. So there's going to be new students inside Little Red, but I'm sure they'll be you don't really think of Little Red having somebody inside that costume. You just think of them as its own entity.
Yeah,
it is a cool mascot. It kind of freaks people out the first time they see him kind of turn on his head and flip upside down, but it's pretty cool.
My wife's creeped out by it, but I think it's incredible. You don't get many inflatable mascots anymore. It's just not a thing. So I'm always it's a real thrill when I get to see Little Red in person. So that's always a good one for me.
I'll make sure we get a picture of you when you come to PBA next year.
Oh my gosh, please. Oh. No, we lost Matt as he's guaranteeing me a picture with Little Red.
The Little Red contract.
Oh, he's back. Okay. Yes, I need a picture with Little Red. That'll be my screensaver forever. Yeah, we definitely need to make that happen. Hey, let's go back to basketball to finish this up here, Matt. Nebraska under Amy Williams, a consistent Big Ten contender, a consistent NCAA tournament participant. What does Nebraska need to do to take that next step? What is that next step for this program? Can they get into a hosting conversation? Can they be a top 4 seed in the Big Ten tournament? What is the next step, and how do they get there?
You've nailed it. In women's basketball, you've got to host. You've got to host in the NCAA tournament. It is, if everything were completely neutral, then I think other factors come in. But, we're in the right league. What is the difference between Indiana, Michigan State, Nebraska, Michigan? How you separate yourself through there. I think one of the things that Amy Williams has an advantage of, and you brought it up, nobody transferred out of this program. You're going to see very few teams that have that consistency. And while she's got several transfers, you bring a Potts, Prince, Nisley, Haight, Widener, Bojan, Petrie, and Hargrove back. I've said for years the team that has the most experience is who I put at the top of the league. So, trying to get by UCLA and USC is not going to be fun in this league for any of us. But you're going to have to find a win over one of those teams, I think, to take that next step for Nebraska. Amy Williams, the next step here is to make a Sweet 16. It's only happened twice in school history. And I think in order to do it, you got to be a host, which means if you can be a top 4 seed in the Big Ten tournament, you can be a hosting seed in the NCAA tournament. Our league is that good. So I think that's what they need to do is find a way to knock off one of those monsters in Los Angeles and hold serve at home, and I think they can do that.
Well, and we saw that last year. All 4 of the top 4 seeds in the Big Ten tournament ultimately went on to host. We weren't sure if we would see that. It ended up happening. So maybe that's the recipe. Can you be a top 4 seed? Yeah. Probably gets you a top 4 seed in the NCAA tournament as well. And you guys get the LA schools in Lincoln this year, correct?
Yeah, I owe personal property taxes to Los Angeles County because the Pinstripe Bowl happened the day that the team flew out in a charter flight for our 2-game junta out there. And so the network threw me out on a commercial flight the day before to be the football studio anchor in a hotel room for 11 hours. So, yeah, I've spent more time in Los Angeles than Kim Kardashian has.
You and Dalton were both out there for what felt like forever last year. I got to go to LA this year. So
my former high school classmate Brad Pitt, I should have looked him up when I was out there and say, hey, can you put me up to save the network some money here? So.
Hey, you'll enjoy the Northwest. That was a fun trip that we got to take last year. That's an enjoyable one if you get some good weather while you're up in Eugene and Seattle.
I can't wait. I love Seattle. I was just out there for another business trip not too long ago. I may not leave Seattle. I love that place so much.
It was awesome.
Didn't they change over their radio team last year? Are they looking? I'm not leaving Nebraska, but
we'll get you. I think Gary's with the Mariners now. So they've got some change over there, Matt. Maybe you can just knock on some doors while you're there and and make some phone calls.
As long as it doesn't conflict with the Huskers schedule, I'll fly out and I'll
he's a dual broadcaster.
Talk to Tina Langley and say, hey, I'll help you out here. And just,
Oh man, I love this. We've got pictures with Lil Red, Matt doing two teams in one league. This is incredible, Matt. This has been a wonderful conversation. I'm excited to catch up with you in Lincoln this year, and excited to see the Huskers. I think this team's going to be really fun to watch and should be a contender in this Big Ten Conference.
I love Big Ten basketball. I love you guys. We have a really good group of Big Ten broadcasters, and for your viewers who watch this, if they haven't figured out that you want to see your team win, obviously, but you love seeing your peers and your friends on the road, and I can't wait to see you guys. So thanks for having me on today.
I hate when you guys are so nice, because then I do have to root for your teams, like, gosh dang it. I got to be happy when someone else's team wins, because, man, Matt's such a good guy. Like,
you're too kind. You're too kind, guys.
Well, Matt, thanks for joining us. Dalton, thanks for jumping on. And thank you all for listening. A reminder to check out the Back Home Network YouTube channel. That's where all our visual aids are with the videos. If you're listening to us in podcast form, check us out over there. If you're listening to us online, you can check us out podcast form on Apple and Spotify. We're back next Tuesday with a preview of the USC Trojans. Going to look a lot different this season. We're going to talk to Eli Kleiman, their play-by-play voice, next week to chat Trojan women's basketball. But until then, I'm Austin Render. Thanks to Dalton and Matt, and episode 54 in the books. We will talk to you guys next week from the Dribble Drive podcast.